Hello, and thank you for taking your time to watch this video. Today what I'd like to do is go through some of the key points to dewinterize your boat for the early spring launch. This will make things much more hassle-free and easier, more enjoyment for your friends and family. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is go ahead and check our prop, underwater gear, and any of the equipment on the transom of the boat. So I'm just going to rub my fingers along this prop here and see if there's any noticeable dings on each one of the blades. We want to make sure everything's running smooth and the boat's not vibrating. And then I'm going to go ahead and see if I can feel any play in the prop. This one feels nice and solid. I'm going to give myself a good inspection of the rudder and make sure everything's clean on that. A lot of times you can torque that and spin it. If you can spin it real easy with your hands, that means things are functioning nice and smooth and easy. As we move up, we want to check all of our tabs, our center plate tab. What we're looking for here is to see if we see any nicks, any torque, any bends on it. And then also I like to look at all the welds because there's so much pressure going on these. And then you want to move out to your outside surf tabs, the Go Surf Assist. Same thing, I want to check all my welds down here, make sure everything looks nice and clean. There's no obstructions and it doesn't look like there was any impact. So now that we've got this checked out, let's go ahead and hop inside the boat and go through a couple of different things. So welcome inside the boat. What I'd like to touch on now is the batteries. As we all know, the newer boats are running a lot of electronics, and those electronics like to have full voltage. So we want to go ahead and make sure that we check our batteries. As you see down here, we've disconnected the batteries for winter storage. That makes it much more likely that the batteries aren't going to get drained, kind of protects everything. And as you can see, there's a fair amount of corrosion on each of these connections. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and clean those up with the wire brush, and then we'll also hit them with a good corrosion inhibitor, and that's going to give us a good connection all the way through. The other thing that we'll do is we're going to hook up a battery charger to each one of these batteries to make sure that they're truly topped off. Another tip that's very important, I can't stress this enough, is that we want to make sure that we're using hex nuts to tighten down any of our connections, especially when you have the threaded connections. A lot of times you'll see that there's wing nuts and those just don't cut the mustard. You actually want to put a wrench on any of these to make sure that we're getting a very solid connection. The other thing is, even though we top these batteries off, if you fire the boat up, let it run for a little bit, and then you put the boat to the side and don't start it for another 3 or 4 weeks, you do have the potential that the batteries have run down. So keep that in mind when you're getting ready to head to the lake. That's what we have on the batteries. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. The next item that we want to check is your bilge pump. Not only the standard bilge pump, but we want to check the automatic bilge pump as well. Obviously, with all the ballast that goes in these boats, the potential for water going into the hull, we want to make sure the bilge is going to work. So let's go ahead and dive down into the bilge, and we'll show you where exactly that bilge is at. In this particular boat, all the boats will have different bilges in different places. Some have 2, some have 1. So you just want to check all of your bilge. So let's go ahead and dive in and have a look at it. Okay, so here we are in the bilge of the boat. This is a 2014 Tomcat, and this is where most of the bilge pumps are located in the MBs. Again, in the other brands, it may be in a different location and also a different style bilge pump. But what we're running here is the Sahara 500 gallon per minute pump. I'm sorry, 500 gallon per hour pump. And what I want to do is just rotate my tab down here, and you can hear that click, and that's the float switch. So when I click that on, the bilge automatically turns on. That tells me that the automatic is working. And then also on the dash, I've went ahead and hit that switch to confirm that that's working. If you find for some reason that your automatic bilge pump is not working, the first thing I would check is inside of your wiring harness here, there's going to be some butt connectors, and those can be prone to corrosion because there's always power on it. You want those to stay live. So even when your battery switches off, your automatic bilge pump is still working. So before you decide to put a new pump in, just check your butt connectors here. You may have to replace those. So that's what we have on the automatic bilge pump and on the manual bilge pumps. And Something that's very, very important for you to check. Okay, the next item that we want to check is to make sure that our water intake hose is connected properly. A lot of times this hose here will be disconnected for the winterization process, and you just want to make sure that that got hooked back up and is nice and solid. This hose actually comes from the bottom of the boat, comes all the way up through the sea strainer and then down into the tranny. A lot of times we'll disconnect this hose at the tranny to get our antifreeze into the vessel. So you want to make sure that that's connected, and actually go ahead and put a screwdriver or nut driver on our hose clamp here. And then the other thing that we like to do is go ahead and spin your sea strainer cup off, just to ensure that it's nice and clean. We don't have any weeds or sand or anything in there. And when you put this back on, you want to make sure that you have your seal in here, because this has to be a very airtight connection. So we'll go ahead and put that on. As you can see, she threads on real nice and easy. And I want to give this a pretty significant crank down, again, because we want to make sure that it's airtight. So that should be good and tight. So we're all safe with this. That's something that's very, very important, and we'll touch base on not only why that's so important, but another item to check when you actually back the boat into the water. Let's go ahead and move to the next item. Okay, once again, we're kind of down into the bilge area, and this video is showing how nice the access is with an MB to be able to get to all of these service items. So you want to check all the fluids in the boat before you start it. So back here, there's going to be 2 fluid checks. One will be for the V drive and one will be for the transmission. So the transmission, we've got our dipstick back here. It just threads out, and you want to pull that dipstick out. Of course, because the engine is cold, it's going to show a little high to check the tranny fluid and to make sure that it's at the proper level. You actually have to run the boat, shift it in and out of gear, shut it down, and then pull this dipstick within 5 seconds to get a true reading. So when you pull it out, just to make sure that your level is correct before initially starting, when you pull this out, it will appear to be a little high. If it's not, chances are you're going to have to add some fluid. And the same thing rings true with our V drive down here at the bottom. It's a different fluid. We use Delvac in the V drive and regular trans fluid in the transmission. And then the other item that we want to check, of course, is the motor oil. So let's go ahead and hop to the back so we can have a look at the motor oil. Again, dipsticks will be in a little different location on some of the engines, but usually they're pretty well labeled with the dipstick. So in this particular one here, of course, we've got our engine dipstick, and we want to pull that out. Make sure that the fluid is at the correct level. If it's too high, that's not a good sign. Means that there could be some water in there. If it's too low, you need to make those adjustments. But again, all these fluids are items that you definitely want to check before you go ahead and fire the engine at all. Of course, to protect the engine and make sure everything is properly lubricated. Okay, so here we are at the dash, and here's where we want to test all of the different items that can be operated from the dash. So it's more of a flip the switch and make sure that the switch is doing what it wants to do. So we want to check our navigation lights. We want to check our surf lights if equipped. We want to check the anchor light. All of the different lights. We want to check the bilge, make sure that switch is working. Check the blower. I recommend for the blower, not only turn it on so you can hear it, but walk to the back of the boat and go ahead and put your hand over the blower exhaust to make sure that the hoses are connected properly and you're venting. The other thing that I like to do at this point as well, go ahead and flip your switches on for the ballast system. What this does is it allows you to make sure that your ballast pumps are working properly. If you have a tsunami pump, obviously you can turn those on without damaging any impellers. You're only turning it on for a quick second anyhow. But the reversible pumps really is where we're checking to make sure that that impeller has not adhered to the housing. And so when you flip that switch, you just want to do it very quickly so you don't burn up your impeller, and you want to switch it for empty and also fill, and just do a real quick check on that. Nothing worse than getting your boat in the water, forgetting to check those. You're ready for your first surf sesh and you don't have any ballast available. Let's go ahead and move to the next item. Okay, so finally we've made all of our systems checks inspected everything to make sure that we're ready to go. And now there's two different ways that we can initially fire the boat up and make sure that the engine is running properly. The first way would be to run the boat while it's on the trailer. And of course, with this system, you'll need a fake lake where you'll connect the water at the bottom of the boat. That way we're feeding the engine to keep it cool. And then the other way would be going to the lake. And right now we're gonna cover the way that we would go to the lake. So once you're all set, your batteries are checked at 12 volts, we're hooked up and ready to go to the lake. What I recommend is you go ahead and back the boat into the water while leave the boat on the trailer. And at this point, what we want to do is make sure that we're deep enough in the water. Go ahead and turn your key on, give it a few seconds so your pump can prime, hit that switch, and the boat fires up. At that point, what we want to do is allow the boat to run until it comes up to its operating temperature. You don't want to back off until it gets to that point and maintains. All too often we'll see somebody will get a little excited, it's the first 80-degree day, and they just back off the trailer and fly across the lake, and they found that there was a water hose or something that wasn't hooked up properly, and next thing they know, they have a major overheat. So what I recommend at this point, while the boat is idling and coming up to temperature, is you'll go ahead and open up your back hatch, and go ahead and remove any trays that are in this area. And I'm just going to dive down in here and inspect the sides of the engine, make sure I don't see water spraying anywhere. I would also recommend probably having your side panels off, just gives you much better visibility. And then also another very quick check that you can do is getting back into our rear seat area that is underneath. And just by looking at a quick inspection here, of course, since the boat hasn't been in the water, it should be pretty doggone dry. If you see a lot of water coming out at this point, go ahead and shut the motor down and see if there's a hose that popped off, or maybe there was a plug that did not get reinstalled properly during the winterization process. So that is the first method that I would recommend. Even if you run the boat on the trailer first, I still recommend really inspecting this and letting the boat come up to temperature and make sure that it maintains for 1 or 2 minutes before you back off the trailer. Okay, so here we are down into the bilge again, and I wanted to show you the second way that we'll actually run the boat while it's on the trailer. Of course, you have the fake lake system. Those of you that have that are familiar with that, but a fake lake basically is an upside down plunger that you can hook a hose to, a garden hose, and wedge it underneath the bottom of the boat, and that will allow you to run the boat, which works just fine. The one thing that's not as great about that is if you're by yourself, sometimes if that fake lake for whatever reason falls off, you won't know it till the boat starts to overheat. So a different method that we do here at Aqua Sports is we actually will disconnect our intake hose. Again, on this end, it's coming from the bottom of the boat, goes through the sea strainer into the transmission. So at this point here, we'll go ahead and remove that hose clamp, pull this hose off, and we have a secondary piece of hose. For your information, this is 1.25 inch hose, and we connect that right back to the bottom, and we'll run that hose out the side of the boat. Of course, using a lot of towels and that type of thing, just so you're not marking up your upholstery or the fiberglass. And then once that hose is hanging off the side of the boat, usually a 6 to 8 foot piece is adequate, we'll stick the garden hose in that, turn the garden hose on, and then fire it up. That way we can inspect the engine, the plugs, all of the other hoses while we're in the boat, and we're confirmed that we're getting good water flow. The key point to this is when you're done running the boat, make darn sure when you unhook that you're going to hook this hose back up. And again, that's why I recommend when you go to the launch for the very first time, as soon as you fire the boat up, you want to come back here and inspect for any leaks. That could cause a catastrophic overheat if this hose is not hooked up and the boat's ran for too long. That concludes our dewinterization ideas and tips and pointers. If you have anything else that you'd like to throw at us, feel free to email me at Jeff@Aqua Sports Marine, or give me a shout at 810-629-2800. Remember, we are the Southeast Michigan dealer for MB boats, Tige boats, and ATX boats. I really appreciate you taking your time to go through this video.